So now I've cut the lip and cut the slot out for the lip. Just need to finish sanding really, just to smooth out any bridges and also reduce the boxiness, the flat area on the layer. So to do that I'm going to make another sanding block, and what I've done for this is taken a piece of 1 1/4 waste, wrapped some coarse sandpaper around and basically rubbed a depression into a block of balsa. And then I'm going to stick some fine sandpaper, this is 300 grade sandpaper, because I'm in the finishing stages. I don't really want to be adding coarse, and just stick it in. Just put that back in there. Leave that for a minute to set up. So once that's set, I'm just going to start rubbing the sides, and this is just gently, you don't need a lot of effort. The key with this is to do whatever to both sides. So this is 3rd stroke, and then turn that over and do 3 to the other side. And just have a look at it and see how it feels. It's hard to show this on the camera, but what it's doing is just reducing the area that's flat. And just do the ends. So to keep the symmetry, I'm doing the same to both sides. It's starting to look a little better, and then I'm just going to take some ordinary 300 grade sandpaper and just smooth out any ridges I've made. There's just a couple of minutes sanding should do the trick. Which I think we're really done there. I could keep playing with this all day. Just check the sides and the angles and see if everything's okay. I mean, what you're looking to get rid of is any ridges, so any kind of sharp points between the angles that you've created. At some point I'm just going to have to put it down and leave it. There we go, I think. So once you're happy with the sanding and the finish, it's time really to take the layer back apart and glue the insides together, which are your 2 weights. And your through wire. So if you've not used a huge amount of the adhesive or left it for weeks, it should kind of pop apart, and if it's a bit stiff you can kind of twist, which normally breaks it apart easy. So what I need to do is put some adhesive and clamp the whole thing up. So that was really the first thing to do before gluing it, was just check that it actually goes together okay. Basically a dry run. There'll still be a little bit of tacky adhesive on here, so it should. Yeah, everything seems pretty fine. It doesn't need much pressure to bring it together, and everything seems lined up. So we can take it apart and start messing with the adhesive. So the epoxy I'm using is just a standard cheap epoxy glue. This sets probably about an hour. Still takes about a day to come fully hard. What's best I find to do is to get everything assembled that I'm going to need. So a couple of clamps, some bits of cardboard, the epoxy, something to mix the epoxy on, a mixing stick, a spreader, and very important, some gloves. Epoxy is not particularly poisonous, but over time you can develop an allergy to it if you're handling it with your fingers. It's an irritant basically. So I'm going to mix up equal amounts of the epoxy. And then I'm just going to scoop some and spread it as a coating basically. And I just want to coat all the surfaces that are going to be touching. Just wipe off any excess. Do the other side. The places that I suppose are important to get is in the recesses where the wire goes. Not so much where the weights are, but definitely where the wire is. But also just get rid of the excess as well. Let's scrape that off. Let's put the weight in. Weights. Just wipe a bit of that excess off. Just check it all goes together. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe with the other end, and I'm going to squeeze it together and just wipe any excess that comes out off. There, you can see there's quite a bit there. The excess is incredibly hard to sand if it sets in a drip basically. And I want to keep sanding this to the minimum, really. So if it all looks okay and it looks like it's coming together, what I'm going to do is take a couple of bits of cardboard Just put them either side. And then a couple of clamps. Now if you're a bit messy, it might be advisable to put a bit of sellotape and cover, or a bit of plastic and cover the cardboard, just to stop any stray epoxy sticking the cardboard to your layer. So the joints look pretty good. Again, there's quite a lot of access coming out there, so let's just wipe that off with my glove and clamp it back up. And again on that side, pushing it out. It's just a lot easier to remove this now than it will be later. You can see everything looks lined up. Just check it. Give it a few minutes to settle down and then come back to it and check it again just to see. If not, leave that for however time your epoxy is. If it's 5 minutes or an hour epoxy, just leave it and come back to it basically when it's ready. So it's been a couple of hours really, and I can see that the resin's kind of set. So I'm just going to take it apart, hopefully it'll come apart. Yeah. So it's just a case of quickly sanding the joints. I can put my gloves back on, and also really it's important to put a dust mask back on, because epoxy, again, is an irritant, especially if you're making dust with epoxy in. It's going to get in your lungs. I'll just check the joints. I'm back with the 300 sandpaper. What looks to have happened, because I've wiped the excess epoxy off, it looks that whatever's left has been absorbed into the balsa. So the joints are pretty smooth, and it doesn't really require much, if any, sanding. So what I'm ready to do is put the first base coat on and seal this, which I'm going to use epoxy. And the epoxy I'm going to use is Envirotex Light, which again is a 2-part, but it's got quite a low viscosity, so it's very liquid. What I want this to do is be absorbed into the layer, and as I said, seal the surface. So I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to use a little medical cup, and what I've done with these is attach syringes. I'll turn these upside down and just pull out. For one layer, it's probably half a milliliter of each. The great thing about the syringes is I can accurately measure out amounts, and I know I'm getting equal parts. So I've got my little mixing stick, and I'm just going to mix that up. Probably about a minute. So once I've mixed that up properly, I'm going to start spreading it on my layer. This is a disposable paintbrush, just something cheap. What I'm trying to do is just get everything covered with probably what seems like too much resin, which it is too much resin. I'll show you what we'll do with that later. I want it to get wetted out everywhere, basically, into the slot there for the lip along the front. It's not a thin coat. So what I'm going to do is leave that now. I've got a just on a crocodile clip on a stand. However you want to do, hang it up. I'm going to hang that up and leave that for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll come back and do something else with it. Just a couple of important things. This should be warm, basically. Epoxy doesn't set if it's too cold, so it needs to be round. And the temperatures are given in the literature that comes with the resin. Also, you shouldn't raise the temperature or lower it quickly after you've applied it, so you need to be working somewhere with a stable temperature, not somewhere where there's a lot of quick change in temperature, like doors being opened or windows. So we'll leave that and I'll come back to it. So this is at about 20 minutes, and now what I'm going to do is actually wipe some of this resin off. What I'm hoping that happened is basically the wood has absorbed some of the resin, and what's left on the surface is the stuff that's over. So I'm just going to literally wipe it off. So I'm going to leave that now, overnight basically, and come back to it. So that's had overnight really to cure. This resin takes 2-3 days to fully harden up, but there's enough there, and I can see the shininess. I can see there's a lot of it that's disappeared into the wood. It feels a bit harder. So I'm just going to take some 300 gauge and just give it just a quick sand, mainly on the joints. What I'm looking for is any areas where there's bits of wood fibre sticking up, which there doesn't seem to be on this. But it looks pretty smooth, the surface there. Interestingly, another thing that's happened is the resin. I'll see that the lip is starting to fit a bit tighter now, because that resin in the end grains narrowed that gap that I cut. That's pretty much done. If there's any bits that are missed, really, you can put a second coat on, which is just do the same, wipe on, leave it for a bit and wipe off. But looking at that, I look to have got basically everywhere on that. So that's the first base for the painting to begin.